The air on Callisto 6 was technically breathable, but Theo had never quite gotten used to the peculiar mixture of sweet decay and metallic tang that permeated everything. His grandmother said it smelled like wet pennies and overripe peaches. Theo thought it smelled like adventure. At 8 years old, Theo had the uncanny ability to ignore both the strange atmosphere and his grandmother's warnings with equal effectiveness. His immunity to caution was as complete as his immunity to the moon's unusual pollen that sent most human visitors into sneezing fits. Stay within the compound. His grandmother had instructed earlier that morning, the same words she'd repeated every day since their arrival 3 months ago. The indigenous areas are off-limits for a reason. Theo had nodded solemnly, already planning his escape route. His grandmother's research station was positioned precisely at the border between the human settlement and what the adults called the quarantine zone. Theo preferred his own name for it, Adventure Country. Now, as the twin moons began their slow ascent, casting the landscape in dual shadows of amber and violet, Theo spotted something darting between the crystal formations of the zone's edge. Small, quick, with an iridescent trail that flickered like static electricity. Without hesitation, he slipped through the gap in the fence that only someone his size could navigate. The terrain beyond the compound was unlike anything Theo had seen in picture books of Earth or the educational holograms of other colonized worlds. The ground undulated in geometric patterns, looking oddly manufactured, like walking on the inside of an ancient circuit board. Crystalline structures grew not up from the soil, but sideways and at impossible angles, defying gravity with casual disregard. Theo followed the mysterious creature deeper into the forbidden zone, scrambling over data node-like mounds and ducking under archways of luminescent mineral. The creature, faster than Theo anticipated, disappeared around a corner. Theo sprinted after it, turning sharply only to find empty air where ground should have been. With a startled yelp, he tumbled down a short slope and landed with a graceless thud in what appeared to be an ancient courtyard. Smooth, hexagonal tiles spread out beneath him, their edges softly glowing with patterns that shifted like ripples when he touched them. "You're bleeding," came a voice from above him. Theo looked up to see a girl standing on a crumbling ledge. At least, she looked mostly like a girl. She was taller than him, with pale lavender skin that seemed to shimmer faintly under the moonlight. Her long black hair was braided with thin strands that might have been wire or vine, and her ears, much longer and more pointed than human ears, twitched slightly as she tilted her head to study him. Her clothing was simple but strange, a tunic and leggings that seemed to subtly shift colors with her movements. Her boots were the most peculiar part, appearing to be made from a single piece of material without seams or laces, curving up at the toes like elegant question marks. "I'm not bleeding," Theo replied, checking his hands and knees. "Just dirty." "Your face," she said, pointing to her own cheek. Theo touched his face, and his fingers came away with a small smear of red. "Oh, it's just a scratch. You're a human." The way she said it sounded like stating the obvious to someone who'd missed it. "Are you a fairy or an alien or both?" Theo asked, standing up and brushing dust from his pants. The girl's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested she was both amused and exhausted by the question. "You're a human," she repeated, as if that explained everything. "My name is Nix." "I'm Theo," he replied, extending his hand as he'd been taught. "Do you live here? In Adventure Country?" "This isn't Adventure Country," Nix said, climbing down from her perch with remarkable agility. "This is a restricted preservation area for living Ogeran technology. You shouldn't be here." "You're here," Theo pointed out. "I'm supposed to be here." "You're not. Are you going to tell on me?" Nix considered this for a moment, her ear tips twitching again. "No," she finally said, "but you should go back before the security drones make their next sweep." "When's that?" 27 minutes. "Then I have 27 minutes to look around," Theo said with a grin that showed his missing front tooth. Against what appeared to be her better judgment, Nix didn't insist that he leave immediately. Instead, she watched him with curious intensity as he explored the courtyard, touching the responsive tiles and peering into a small pool of liquid that might have been water but moved too slowly, like mercury dreaming of becoming syrup. "You're not scared," she observed after a while. "Of what?" "Of me. Of this place." "How soon should I be?" That earned him the first hint of a smile. "Most humans would be." "I'm not most humans," Theo said with the absolute conviction only an 8-year-old could muster. "And you're not scary. You look like you could be in my cousin's video games. Except prettier." Nix made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. "You need to go now. The drones will be here soon." She pointed toward a narrow path. "That way will take you back to the fence. Don't come back here." Theo, of course, came back the very next day. And the day after that. By the fourth day, Nix seemed to have accepted the inevitability of his visits, waiting for him in the courtyard with arms crossed, but eyes betraying a subtle anticipation. Theo had enlisted his younger cousin Amari, the only other child at the research station, as an accomplice, promising to share all discoveries if she would cover for his absences. "I brought something," Theo announced proudly on their fifth meeting, pulling a slightly squashed package from his pocket. "What is it?" Nix asked, cautiously accepting the offering. "Marshmallows. From Earth." "Well, not really from Earth. They're made in the colony kitchens, but they're an Earth recipe." Nix examined the sticky white cube with scientific precision before taking a tentative bite. Her eyes widened, ears perking upright in surprise. "It's just sugar and air," Theo explained, popping one into his mouth. "And some other stuff. Do you like it?" Rather than answering, Nix took another bite, then quickly finished the entire marshmallow. Their meetings became a daily ritual. Theo would bring Earth treats and comic books with worn corners, spreading them out on the hexagonal tiles as he explained Earth concepts like superheroes and school buses. In return, Nix showed him fragments of Ogeron technology, dormant data crystals that hummed when held in certain configurations, and once, disastrously, a small spherical drone that activated when Theo accidentally sneezed on its sensor panel. The drone, which Theo immediately named Uncle Boom, had hovered menacingly for 3 terrifying seconds before Nix spoke a series of melodic syllables that sent it back into hibernation mode. "That was a war drone," she explained, carefully returning it to its resting place. "It's very old and probably wouldn't have worked properly, but still." "Cool," Theo whispered, earning a look of exasperation. They built a rickety shelter in the branches of a tree-like structure that wasn't actually a tree, but some kind of biological data node. The treehouse, as Theo insisted on calling it, was perpetually on the verge of collapse, held together by a combination of Theo's shoelaces and pieces of Ogeron technology that Nix assured him were non-essential and disconnected from the main systems. It was in this precarious hideaway, on an afternoon when the amber moon was full and the violet moon was just a sliver, that Theo made his declaration. "I'm going to marry you when I grow up," he said with absolute certainty, as if announcing that the sky was up or that cookies were delicious. Nix, who had been showing him how to create small temporary holograms with a crystal shard, inhaled sharply and choked on nothing. When she recovered, she looked at him with the kind of patronizing amusement adults often directed at him. "You don't even know what that means," she said. "Yes, I do. It means we promise to be together forever and live in the same house and take care of each other." Theo's definition was simple but heartfelt. "And maybe of pets. You're a human. I'm Ogeron. It doesn't work that way." "Why not?" Nix opened her mouth, then closed it again, apparently unable to produce an answer that an 8-year-old would accept. "I mean it," Theo insisted, suddenly very serious. He extended his little finger. "Pinky promise." Nix stared at his outstretched finger. "What is this?" "A pinky promise. It's the most serious kind of promise there is. If you break it, bad things happen." "What kind of bad things?" "I don't know. Nobody ever breaks them, so nobody knows." Nix hesitated, then slowly extended her own slender finger, longer than Theo's, with an extra joint and a faint luminescence beneath the skin. She hooked it around his. "Promise," she said softly. They sat there for a moment, fingers linked, while the twin moons cast their strange, overlapping shadows through the branches of their not-quite treehouse. Something shifted in the atmosphere between them. something neither of them had words to describe. 2 days later, Nyx was gone. The courtyard stood empty. Their treehouse remained untouched, but there was no sign of her. Theo returned every day for a week, then every week for a month, until eventually his grandmother's research concluded and they left Callisto 6 behind. But Theo never forgot his promise. 10 years later, the smell of ozone and engine grease had replaced the memory of Callisto 6's strange air. At 23, Theo had taken a circuitous route through bad decisions and spectacular explosions to become a Starship technician, 3 academic expulsions, 2 unauthorized shuttle borrowings, and 1 particularly memorable incident involving a cargo bay full of synthetic silk and a contraband matter replicator had shaped his reputation long before he earned his certification. He now spent his days crawling through the guts of a dying transport vessel unimaginatively named the Galloping Ghost. The ship's ancient propulsion system required constant maintenance, which meant Theo spent most of his waking hours contorted inside access tunnels, covered in lubricant and swearing creatively in multiple languages. The Ghost's captain, an equally ancient man named Maddox, tolerated Theo's eccentricities for one reason only. No one else could make the ship's temperamental engines run as smoothly. "You're talking to my ship again," Maddox observed, finding Theo stroking a particularly troublesome coupling valve and murmuring encouragements to it. "She likes the attention," Theo replied without looking up. In his free hand, he clutched a rubber duck that emitted blood-curdling screams when squeezed. The duck, an absolute violation of noise ordinances on 17 different planets, was Theo's diagnostic tool of choice. Theo claimed the duck screams helped him identify vibrational irregularities in machinery. Captain Maddox suspected it was just another manifestation of Theo's peculiarity, but couldn't argue with the results. What Maddox didn't know was that Theo had converted a forgotten storage compartment near the ship's hull into what his crewmates had taken to calling the conspiracy corner. The walls were plastered with star charts marked with erratic flight paths, printouts of signal anomalies, and alien hieroglyphs interspersed with coffee stains that, if viewed from the right angle, resembled Nyx's distinctive ears. "Your obsession is morphing from endearing to concerning," said a tinny voice from the modified toaster that sat in the center of the compartment's tiny desk. "Nobody asked you, Crumb," Theo replied, pinning another signal reading to the wall. Crumb, an illicitly modified AI that Theo had rescued from a scrapyard, had originally been designed to predict perfect toasting times for various bread products. After Theo's enhancements, Crumb had developed both sentience and sarcasm in equal measure. "You've been chasing ghost signals for years," Crumb continued. "At what point do we acknowledge that your childhood alien girlfriend might not be trying to contact you through corrupted data packets?" "She wasn't my girlfriend. She was my fiancée. There's a difference." "Yes, the difference being that neither existed except in your admittedly creative imagination. She was real, and so was my promise. You were 8. A promise is a promise. And what happens when you run out of places to look?" Theo turned to face the toaster, which had illuminated its heating elements in a pattern that somehow conveyed skepticism. "I won't. Your alternative is what? Marry a hologram? I hear they're very compatible with humans who prefer relationships with non-existent entities." "Your concern for my love life is touching," Theo said, returning to his signal analysis. "But unnecessary." It was later that night, as Theo was drifting off to sleep, that Crumb's alarm function activated with an urgent buzz. "Wake up," the AI demanded. "There's something you need to see." Theo stumbled back to the conspiracy corner, bleary-eyed and wearing only boxer shorts printed with cartoon spaceships. "This better be good. I detected a signal on one of your monitoring programs. It's using a frequency band that hasn't been active in decades." Fully awake now, Theo dropped in his chair, fingers flying across the interface. "Where? What's the source?" "Unknown. It's bouncing through several relay points. The signal pattern matches one of your filters, the one you designed to detect Assyrian communication protocols. The Assyrians have been extinct for 3 centuries, Theo said, already working to isolate and clean up the signal. Hence my interest. The signal is degraded, possibly very old, just now reaching this sector. For the next hour, Theo worked feverishly, applying every filtering and enhancement technique he knew. The signal was fragmented, much of it corrupted beyond recovery, but certain sections remained intact. A name, coordinates, a voice, designation Nix of House Vayani. Departure sequence initiated. Evacuation, 17 lunar cycles. Theo froze, heart hammering against his ribs. The voice was different, older, more formal, but unmistakably hers. Are we going to acknowledge the statistical improbability of this scenario? Crumb asked after a long silence. No, Theo replied, already downloading the coordinates. We're going to find her. This is exceptionally ill-advised, Crumb protested. The signal could be decades old. The coordinates are beyond map space. The fuel cost. Alone. I don't care. You'll lose your position on the Ghost. I don't care. You might die. Worth it. Crumb's heating elements dimmed in the AI equivalent of a resigned sigh. I was afraid you'd say that. The next 36 hours were a blur of frantic preparation. Theo cashed in every favor owed to him across 3-star systems. He manipulated customs coding, bribed a pilot with real Earth peanut butter, worth more than gold in frontier systems, and forged documentation with a creativity that would have impressed even the most seasoned identity thieves. You need to call your cousin, Crumb reminded him as he packed his meager belongings. Amari won't want to hear from me after the Proxima incident. The infamous event involving a stolen maintenance shuttle and a governor's daughter remained a sore point between them. Amari is now a diplomatic attaché with clearance to authorize passage through restricted space, Crumb countered. You need her. The call went as well as could be expected. You absolute cosmic disaster, was Amari's greeting when she recognized him. Her official diplomatic uniform contrasted sharply with the colorful language that followed. I love you too, cuz, Theo replied with his most disarming smile. The last time I helped you, I almost lost my scholarship. You were never in any real danger of that. They would never have traced the quantum fluctuations back to your terminal. That's not the point. Amari's expression softened slightly. What trouble are you in now? Why assume I'm in trouble? Because you are you. Theo took a deep breath. I found her, Amari. I found Nix. There was a long pause. Amari was one of the few people who knew the full story, having been his accomplice all those years ago. You're serious, she finally said. Dead serious. I need passage clearance beyond the frontier, to the Ogeran Expanse. The Expanse is a myth, Theo. The coordinates aren't. Another long pause. Send me what you have. I'll see what I can do. 48 hours later, Theo found himself aboard a botanical research vessel called Flora's Intention. The ship's primary mission was to collect plant samples from uncharted systems, which made it one of the few vessels with legitimate reason to venture beyond established routes. The ship was captained by Barclay, a sentient plant from the Vedani system who communicated through a series of translators embedded in his pot. The crew was equally unusual. 2 fungal xenobiologists who communicated through spore releases, a human botanist with more plant than human DNA after a grafting accident, and 3 maintenance droids programmed to sing harmony while working. Theo had been introduced as a fertilizer engineer specializing in exotic growth media. His actual task was to stay out of the way and not reveal that his passage had been arranged through diplomatic channels as a personal favor. You are leaking again, observed one of the fungal xenobiologists, whose name Theo couldn't pronounce without risking a sinus infection. Just condensation, Theo assured him, hastily wiping his sweaty forehead. The ship's atmosphere was kept at tropical humidity levels for the comfort of its predominantly plant-based crew. Humans always leak, the xenobiologist replied with what might have been sympathy or disgust. The translator was unclear on the distinction. Theo retreated to his assigned berth in the cargo hold, squeezed between crates of dormant psychic ferns and what appeared to be singing mushrooms in suspended animation. Through the small porthole, he watched as conventional space gave way to the shimmering boundary of the frontier. Are we sure this isn't an elaborate form of suicide? Crumb asked through their neural link. The AI had temporarily transferred its core functions to a portable processor that Theo carried in his jacket pocket. Since when are you concerned about self-preservation? You're a toaster. I've grown attached to existence. And to you, though I question my judgment on the latter. Theo smiled despite himself. We're going to find her. And if we don't, we will. But if we don't, then at least I tried, Theo said quietly. At least I kept my part of the promise. The ship's jump engines engaged with a familiar lurch, and the stars outside began to streak as they accelerated beyond conventional physics into the vast unknown. Life aboard Flora's Intention was an exercise in adapting to the unconventional. The ship creaked and groaned in ways that would have alarmed Theo had he not spent years inside the galloping ghost's deteriorating hull. The constant humid mist that permeated every corridor made his clothes perpetually damp, and the gentle sound of photosynthesis, like distant wind chimes, followed him everywhere. Captain Barclay seemed to find Theo's presence amusing, in the slow, patient way of beings who measure time in seasons rather than hours. Your pheromones indicate anxiety, the captain observed on their third day of travel. Barclay's translator rendered his communications in a soothing contralto, completely at odds with the captain's appearance as a gnarled trunk with feathery purple leaves. Just eager to reach our destination, Theo replied, trying not to fidget under the scrutiny of Barclay's sensory vines. Anticipation is the soil in which patience grows, Barclay said, a sentiment so botanical that Theo could only nod in response. The nights were the hardest. Alone in his cargo bay berth, Theo would analyze and reanalyze the degrading signal, watching as it grew fainter with each passing day. Every fragment he managed to extract and decode added to his sense of urgency. A glimpse of Nix's face, now older and more defined. Isolated words like council and protocol and exile. And most distressing of all, a partial voice recording that cut off mid-sentence. If you ever hear this, Theo barely slept, haunted by the fear that the signal would disappear entirely before they reached its source. He became a fixture in the ship's hydroponics lab, where the botanist, Dr. Lin, who had chlorophyll-tinged skin and leaf-like hair, took pity on him and allowed him to help with the daily maintenance routines. You are not really a fertilizer engineer, Dr. Lin observed casually one day as they adjusted the nutrient flow to a tank of bioluminescent water lilies. Theo froze, watering can in hand. What makes you say that? Engineers know the difference between nitrogen and phosphorus supplements, she replied with a gentle smile. You've been mixing them up all week. It's all right. I don't even know why you're really here. But perhaps you could use some help with whatever it is you're trying to do. The offer was unexpected but desperately needed. With Dr. Lin's assistance and access to the ship's more sophisticated communication equipment, Theo was able to stabilize the deteriorating signal enough to confirm that they were indeed on the right course. This signal uses quantum entanglement principles, Dr. Lin noted as they worked. Highly advanced. Whoever sent it had technology far beyond anything in the unified systems. The Ajrans, Theo explained. They were our tech wizards. Most people think they're extinct, but you don't. I met one when I was a kid. Dr. Lin's leaf hair rustled in what Theo had come to recognize as thoughtful consideration. And this is why you journey to the edge of known space? For a childhood encounter. For a promise, Theo corrected. Before Dr. Lin could inquire further, the ship's environmental AI, a particularly fussy system that Theo had inadvertently befriended by fixing its humidity sensor with a well-placed smack and a lullaby, chimed an alert. Approach to the Ozern Expanse in 63 minutes, it announced, its voice unusually sweet when addressing Theo. The AI had developed what Crumb jealously referred to as an algorithmic crush on Theo after his unorthodox repair. The announcement sent a ripple of activity through the ship. For the research crew, the Expanse represented unprecedented botanical opportunities. For Theo, it meant he was one step closer to Nyx. The Ozern Expanse was not on any official star charts. Rumors of its existence were dismissed as space legends, tall tales told by long-haul transport pilots to explain missing time or navigation errors. The scientific community considered it an astronomical urban myth, a region supposedly filled with temporal anomalies, defensive singularities, and reality bubbles created by an ancient civilization to protect their retreat from the expanding human presence. Theo joined the crew on the observation deck as Flora's intention approached the supposed boundary of the expanse. At first, there appeared to be nothing but empty space ahead, but as they drew closer, the darkness began to shimmer like heat waves rising from desert sand. Stars behind this boundary appeared to bend and refract, their lights stretching into prismatic streaks that twisted impossibly. Remarkable, Captain Barclay rustled. The space fabric itself is altered. Sensors are detecting severe gravitational fluctuations, reported one of the fungal xenobiologists, whose console was sprouting colorful warning symbols. Conventional navigation will be compromised if we proceed. This is your stop, isn't it? Dr. Lin asked Theo quietly. Theo nodded, his mouth suddenly dry. I need to take one of the sample collection shuttles. You understand that we cannot follow you in there, Captain Barclay interjected, his translator conveying concern despite its mechanical tone. Our primary mission prevents such risk. I know, Theo said, and I'm grateful for bringing me this far. Preparations for his departure were hastily made. The smallest of the research vessels, little more than a reinforced pod with minimal life support and thrusters, was loaded with emergency supplies. Dr. Lin insisted on including several of her hardiest specimens to improve your atmospheric quality, though Theo suspected it was simply her way of sending part of herself along on the journey. The odds of your survival are statistically negligible, Crumb commented as Theo suited up in the ship's locker room. I've calculated them at approximately. I don't want to know, Theo interrupted. Just help me navigate once we're inside, making the generous assumption that conventional physics even applies in there. One of the maintenance droids approached, its vine-like appendages adjusting Theo's suit with surprising gentleness. The captain wishes to remind you that fertilizer is expected upon your return, it sang in a pleasant tenor. Tell him I'll bring back samples from the other side, Theo replied, knowing full well the promise was as empty as the space he was about to venture into. Captain Barclay himself was waiting at the shuttle bay, his pot mounted on a hovering platform. One of his branches extended, offering what appeared to be a small seed. A gesture from my people, the translator explained. When one ventures into unknown territory, they carry a piece of home. It will grow wherever you find yourself. Theo accepted the seed with genuine gratitude, carefully securing it in his suit's chest pocket. Thank you, Captain. May your roots find fertile soil, Barclay replied, withdrawing his branch as the bay doors began to close. The shuttle detached from Flora's intention with a gentle push, thrusters engaging as Theo piloted away from the relative safety of the research vessel toward the shimmering boundary of the expanse. Last chance to reconsider this monumentally ill-conceived plan, Crumb said from the shuttle's console, where Theo had temporarily installed the AI. Not a chance, Theo replied, accelerating toward the unknown. Crossing the boundary was like experiencing a warm headache, a sensation Theo's brain struggled to categorize. Colors inverted, then blurred, then sharpened to painful brightness before settling into hues that seemed just slightly off from normal. The stars twisted into spirals that looped back on themselves in geometrically impossible patterns. The shuttle's navigation system surrendered immediately, displaying error messages in 17 languages before switching inexplicably to playing smooth jazz. Theo's instruments reported that they were simultaneously accelerating and standing still, that oxygen levels were both critically low and impossibly high, and that the temperature outside was best described as plaid. I believe conventional physics has taken a holiday, Crumb observed with remarkable calm. I recommend manual navigation based on the last known coordinates from the signal. And how exactly do I do that when up and down seem to be having an identity crisis? Theo asked, wrestling with controls that felt increasingly metaphorical. Trust your instincts, Crumb suggested. Your irrational human intuition might actually be an advantage in this thoroughly irrational environment. For what felt like hours, though the shuttle's chronometer was now displaying symbols that resembled either ancient Sumerian or a child's drawing of cats, Theo navigated by feel through the disorienting space. The signal from Nyx, remarkably, remained consistent, even as everything else fluctuated wildly around them. At one point, Theo was almost certain he saw a whale wearing a monocle swim past the view screen, but Crumb suggested it might be a hallucination induced by the temporal distortion or possibly the emergency ration bars Theo had consumed, which had expired 3 years earlier. Then, as suddenly as they had entered the chaos, they emerged into absolute stillness. The jazz stopped, the instruments reset, the colors normalized, and before them floated a planet. It wasn't on any chart, of course, but it was undeniably there, a perfect pearl carved from moonlight, its surface etched with geometric patterns that stretched across entire continents. Oceans of what might have been water captured and reflected the light of a distant white dwarf star, creating the impression that the entire world was softly glowing from within. Signal strength increasing. Crumb reported, all traces of sarcasm gone from its voice. Source location identified. Orbiting the planet was a space station, old but not ancient, its design unlike anything in the unified systems. It rotated slowly, lights flickering along its spindle-like arms, as if it were sending a message in some forgotten code. "That's it," Theo whispered, hands trembling slightly as he adjusted their course. "That's where she is." "The signal is now transmitting at full strength," Crumb confirmed. "And it's not a recording or an echo. It's active. Someone is sending it now." As they approached the station, its details became clearer, a blend of organic and mechanical elements, with curved sections that resembled solidified liquid and straight edges that cut through space with mathematical precision. Docking ports extended like welcoming hands, one of them illuminating as they drew near. "I think we're being invited in," Theo said, guiding the shuttle toward the indicated port. "Or lured to our doom," Crumb suggested, though without much conviction. The docking sequence engaged automatically, the station's systems interfacing with the shuttle as if they had been designed to work together. With a gentle shudder and the hiss of pressure equalization, they were secured. "Well," Theo said, standing and checking the atmospheric readout, which showed conditions within human tolerance. "Moment of truth. Whatever happens," Crumb said as Theo prepared to disembark, "I want it noted that I accompanied you on this fool's errand despite my better judgment, which clearly demonstrates a level of loyalty that transcends mere programming." "Noted," Theo replied with a smile. "And appreciated." With his screaming rubber duck tucked safely in one pocket and Crumb's processor in another, Theo unsealed the shuttle's door and stepped onto the station, 15 years after making a pinky promise to an alien girl who had vanished without saying goodbye. The air lock opened with a soft hiss, revealing a corridor that seemed to breathe. The walls pulsed with bioluminescence in gentle waves, creating an effect like walking through the inside of a living organism. The architecture was distinctly Ogeran, elegant curves meeting precise angles, materials that looked like metal but felt warm to the touch, and everywhere, subtle patterns that shifted when observed from different angles. Theo moved cautiously down the hallway, noting how the lighting brightened ahead of him and dimmed behind, as if the station itself was guiding his path. There were no visible control panels or interfaces, just seamless surfaces that occasionally rippled with information in a script he couldn't read. "The construction is remarkable," Crumb commented through their neural link. "Self-repairing biomechanical composites. The entire station is technically alive." At the end of the corridor stood a door unlike the others, made from what appeared to be silver wood. It was carved with intricate designs that reminded Theo of the circuit-like patterns in the Forbidden Zone where he'd first met Nyx. Unlike the other seamless entries, this one had a physical handle that seemed to invite touch. Theo hesitated, his heart hammering against his ribs. After 15 years of searching, of clinging to a childhood promise that everyone else dismissed as fantasy, He was here. Whatever lay beyond this door would either validate his entire life's trajectory or reveal it as the cosmic wild goose chase Crumb had always claimed it to be. With a deep breath, he grasped the handle and pushed. The door opened into a circular chamber with a domed ceiling that appeared to be made of living crystal. The space was sparsely furnished but comfortable, with curved seating arrangements and what might have been a control console or a musical instrument occupying the center. Small, curious spheres floated near the ceiling, each emitting a different colored light, occasionally drifting lower as if to get a better look at the visitor. And there, standing by a viewport that framed the pearl-like planet below, was Nyx. She had grown taller, her previously lanky frame now lithe and poised with a dancer's precision. Her lavender skin had deepened to a richer hue, still subtly luminescent, but now marked with faint patterns like circuits just beneath the surface. Her ears, still distinctively pointed, were adorned with delicate metal spirals that moved slightly with her pulse. Her black hair was longer, braided with thin metallic strands that occasionally sparked with tiny electrical discharges. She wore what appeared to be a uniform or formal attire, fitted and practical, with insignias Theo didn't recognize. But it was her eyes that caught and held him. The same intense, slightly wary gaze he remembered, now sharpened by whatever experiences had filled the years between. For a long moment, neither spoke. The floating spheres drifted lower, their lights creating a shifting aurora between the two figures. "Hi," Theo finally said, his carefully rehearsed speeches evaporating into the charged silence. "Sorry I'm late. Space traffic." The corner of Nyx's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but a crack in her composed exterior. Her eyes flicked to his pocket, where the rubber duck was partially visible. "You brought a toy," she observed, her voice deeper than he remembered, with musical undertones that hadn't been present in childhood. "It's a diagnostic tool," Theo responded automatically, then shrugged with a half-smile. "That screams." A soft sound escaped Nyx, almost a laugh quickly contained. She moved closer, studying him with the same intense curiosity she'd shown when they were children. "You remembered," she said finally, her voice softer. "Of course I remembered," Theo replied. "You think I make pinky promises lightly?" That earned him a real smile, small but genuine, transforming her face in a way that made Theo's chest tighten. For a moment, he could see the girl from the courtyard superimposed over the composed woman who stood before him. "I didn't think you would come," Nyx admitted. "Not after so long. I would have come sooner if I could have found you." An awkward silence fell between them. All of Theo's carefully rehearsed speeches, ranging from casual nonchalance to dramatic declarations, seemed utterly inadequate in the face of reality. How do you compress 15 years of searching into words that don't sound desperate or accusatory? "Would you like a tour?" Nyx offered, gracefully breaking the tension. "I would love one," Theo replied, gratitude washing over him. As they walked through the station, Nyx explained its functions: a monitoring outpost, research facility, and occasional diplomatic waypoint. The floating spheres followed them, occasionally projecting small holograms of information in response to Nyx's gestures. "Why did you disappear?" Theo asked finally, as they paused before a viewport overlooking the shimmering planet below. "One day you were there, and then—" "It wasn't my choice," Nyx said, her fingers tracing patterns on the transparent surface. "When my people discovered I had been meeting with you, they considered it a breach of protocol. The Ozhranar, protective of their knowledge and presence. We observe, we document, but we don't engage. I broke that rule. Because of me. Because I wanted to," she corrected. "But yes, our meetings were discovered, and I was reassigned. When the evacuation order came for all remaining outposts on Callisto 6, I was already gone." "Evacuation?" "My people have been slowly retreating from expanding human space for centuries. We leave observation posts, technology in dormant states, but we withdraw." "Where to?" Nyx gestured toward the planet below. "Sanctuaries. Places protected by the Expanse. Few remain on traditional worlds now." She led him deeper into the station, to a small chamber that seemed more personal than the others. Here, there were things Theo recognized, books from Earth, including a well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice and something called the Galactoplatypus Chronicles. And there, carefully preserved in a floating display, was one of his old comic books. "You kept it," he said, surprised. "It reminded me of a simpler time," Nyx replied, her ears twitching slightly in what Theo now recognized as embarrassment. "Before I understood the full weight of my heritage." "Which is?" Nyx sat in one of the curved chairs, gesturing for Theo to join her. "The Ogeron are keepers of knowledge. Archivists, essentially. We document civilizations, technologies, evolutionary paths. We collect and preserve, but we don't interfere. We maintain the ancient technologies like those on Callisto 6, but we're not supposed to reveal ourselves." "So, I was a protocol violation," Theo said, trying to keep his tone light. "A catastrophic one." Nyx agreed with unexpected humor. "The Council was displeased, and yet you sent a signal. You wanted to be found." Nyx's gaze dropped to her hands, which were twisting together in her lap. "When the final evacuation orders came, I realized I might never have a chance to—" She hesitated. "To explain why I disappeared. To say goodbye properly. Is that all?" Theo asked quietly. Her eyes met his. "No." A beat of silence. "I want to know if you remembered. If you ever thought about that ridiculous promise." "Every day," Theo said simply. "It's why I became a technician. Why I learned to trace signals across impossible distances. Why I spend my life looking up at stars instead of settling down like everyone told me to." "That's excessive," Nyx said, but her expression softened. "I've been told I lack a sense of proportion," Theo agreed. "But here's the thing. You were the first person who didn't treat me like a joke, who looked at my weird questions and endless curiosity and didn't see a problem to be managed. You showed me wonders instead of telling me to stop looking for them." A laugh escaped Nyx, genuine and bright. "I showed you dangerous technology that nearly got us both vaporized." "Exactly. Best childhood ever." They smiled at each other, the years of separation momentarily bridged by shared memory. "So," Nyx said after a while, her tone carefully neutral, "what happens now? You found me. You kept your promise to return. What did you expect would happen next?" It was a fair question, one Theo had purposely avoided asking himself during all his years of searching. He'd been so focused on the finding that he'd given little thought to what came after. "Honestly, I don't know," he admitted. "I just knew I had to find you, to see you again, to make sure you were real and not some elaborate hallucination caused by Callisto 6's atmosphere. And if I am real, if I'm still interested in that promise." Theo's heart hammered against his ribs. "Then I stay here with you for as long as you'll have me." Nyx studied him, her expression unreadable. "The Ogeron Council would have opinions about that." "The Council can spacewalk without a suit," Theo replied immediately, then winced. "Sorry, that was impolite." "It was," Nyx agreed, a smile playing at her lips, "but not inaccurate in terms of their flexibility. Still, perhaps we should ask them." "Ask them? Directly? Why not? You come all this way. Might as well be thorough." Before Theo could respond, Nyx stood and extended her hand. After a moment's hesitation, he took it, noticing how her skin was cooler than human temperature, with a subtle vibration like purring. She led him to a transport tube, a column of what appeared to be liquid light. "This will take us to the council chamber. Don't worry, it's perfectly safe. For most species." "Most," Theo squeaked as she pulled him into the light. Traveling through the light shaft was like being gently disassembled and reassembled at the molecular level. Painless, but disconcerting. They emerged in a vast domed chamber at what must have been the station's center. The ceiling was a perfect astronomical map, stars and galaxies slowly rotating in real-time display. "You didn't tell me we were meeting them now," Theo whispered urgently, suddenly aware of his rumpled appearance after days in the shuttle. "I would have at least washed my face." "Appearances are irrelevant to the Council," Nyx assured him. "They perceive on different levels." "That's not reassuring." As if responding to their arrival, the chamber's ambient lighting shifted, and shapes began to form around the periphery. Not physical beings taking seats, but rather concentrations of light and energy that somehow conveyed presence. Each manifestation had a distinct color and rhythm to its illumination, some pulsing quickly while others maintained a slow, steady glow. The Ogeron High Council, Nyx explained, bowing slightly. Honorable Council, I present Theodore Reeves of Earth Colony Extension, former resident of Callisto 6, current independent navigator. That's a generous interpretation of my job title, Theo muttered. The light entities seemed to brighten in response, colors shifting in what might have been amusement. Despite their non-corporeal appearance, Theo didn't find them threatening. Rather, they emanated a curious warmth, like sitting before a hearth on a cold night. Greetings, Theodore Reeves, came a voice that seemed to originate from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. It was not a single voice, but a harmonic blend of many, speaking in perfect unison. Your journey to our sanctuary is unprecedented. Hello, Theo managed, giving an awkward half-bow that he immediately regretted. Thank you for not disintegrating me on arrival. The lights pulsed in what Theo desperately hoped was amusement rather than annoyance. Your presence provides unexpected diversion, the council replied. Few humans seek what is not visible to them. Fewer still persist beyond reason. Persistence beyond reason is basically my personal brand, Theo said, finding his footing somewhat. Indeed, the council's collective attention seemed to shift to Nyx. Archivist Vayani, you believe this human's presence warrants exception to our isolation protocols? Nyx straightened, her official demeanor returning. I do, Honorable Council. Theodore Reeves has demonstrated exceptional dedication in honoring a promise made 15 solar cycles ago. Such commitment to one's word is rare in any species. A promise, echoed the council. What was the nature of this binding agreement? Theo felt a flush creep up his neck. I promised to marry her. When I grew up, there was a moment of silence, followed by what could only be described as cosmic chuckling, the lights rippling in synchronized waves of amusement. You pledged a lifetime bond to an Ogeron archivist when you were a child, the council clarified. And you have traversed uncharted space, risked temporal dissolution, and violated multiple territorial boundaries to fulfill this commitment. Yes, Theo replied simply. I did. Why? The question came sharp and clear, all amusement gone from the harmonic voice. Theo looked at Nyx, then back at the council. Because I said I would. Because promises matter, especially the ones that seem impossible to keep. And because... He hesitated, then pressed on. Because in all the universe, I've never found anyone who made me feel the way I felt in that treehouse under the twin moons. Love is not logical, observed the council after a moment. But neither is time. You honor both. Theo wasn't entirely sure what that meant, but it sounded vaguely positive. Therefore, the council continued, we will permit a period of integration. Theodore Reeves may remain at this outpost for one complete lunar cycle. During this time, both parties may determine if childhood promises translate to adult compatibility. Thank you, Honorable Council, Nyx said formally, bowing again. Wait, that's it? Theo asked, surprised. You're okay with this? No threats? No warnings about human contamination? We are not barbarians, Theodore Reeves. The council replied with what sounded suspiciously like wounded dignity. We are archivists. Your experiences with Archivist Vayani will themselves become part of our records. A unique cross-species social experiment. So, I'm a lab rat? Theo clarified. An honored guest participant in an unprecedented cultural exchange. The council corrected smoothly. With potential romantic subclassifications. Nyx tugged at Theo's arm. Quit while you're ahead, she murmured. As they were dismissed and returned via the light shaft to the lower levels, Theo found himself oddly giddy with relief. They're actually nice, he said. Cryptic and definitely spying on us, but nice. They're curious, Nyx corrected. And you surprised them, which almost never happens to beings who have observed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. So, one lunar cycle, Theo said, reality beginning to sink in. I have 1 month to prove that an 8-year-old's marriage proposal wasn't completely insane. Approximately 37 Earth days, Nix confirmed. Assuming you still want to try. Theo took her hand, feeling the strange synchronicity of their completely different pulse rates. I crossed the expanse to find you. I think I can manage a month of awkward dating. Nix's laughter echoed through the living corridors of the station, warmer and more genuine than he'd heard it yet. We'll see about that, Theodore Reeves. We'll see. The first week on the station was a masterclass in cross-cultural adaptation. Theo learned that what he'd assumed was a toilet was actually a food synthesizer, after an embarrassing incident that the monitoring systems fortunately deleted from official records. He discovered that Ogeron technology responded to intention as much as action, which led to several doors opening before he reached them, and one memorable instance of an entire room rearranging itself while he napped because he'd dreamed about a beach. Nix proved to be a patient guide, explaining complex systems with the same measure tolerance she'd shown the curious 8-year-old boy on Callisto 6. She taught him to navigate the station's transportation tubes, how to use the communal bathing facilities without accidentally summoning cleaning drones, and, most importantly, how to operate the station's universal translator to communicate with a few other non-Ogeron residents. For his part, Theo contributed his technical skills, helping repair a stubborn atmospheric regulator that had been malfunctioning for decades. He also introduced Crumb to the station's AI systems, a meeting that went surprisingly well once Crumb stopped trying to toast all incoming data packets. This is remarkable, Crumb commented after integrating with the station's libraries. The Ogeron databases contain complete records of civilizations I've never even heard of. Just don't get any ideas about upgrading yourself with technology we don't understand, Theo warned. I've seen what happens when you try to improve your toasting algorithms. That fire was a minor setback in the pursuit of scientific advancement, Crumb sniffed. Besides, the Ogerons have been observing AI development across multiple species for millennia. Their insights on artificial consciousness are illuminating. The evenings were when Theo and Nix truly reconnected. After her official duties overseeing the station's archives were complete, they would meet in what had become their shared space, a small observation lounge with a view of the shimmering planet below. There, over cups of a tea-like beverage that tasted like mint and starlight, they would talk about the years between. Theo told her about his academic disasters, his stint as an unauthorized courier in the Proxima system, and his eventual redemption as the galloping ghost's miracle worker. Nix shared stories of her training as an archivist, her assignments documenting fading civilizations, and a solitude that came with her role as a witness to history rather than a participant. Did you ever think about me? Theo asked one night, watching the planet's oceanic patterns shift below them. During all those years, Nix was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the transparent surface between them. I kept your comic book, she finally said. I would look at it sometimes when my duties felt too isolating. It reminded me that somewhere out there was a human who saw me as a person, not just an object of study. On his 10th day at the station, Theo attempted to pilot one of the small, gravity-defying gliders that the Ogerons used for external station maintenance. The training simulation had gone perfectly well, but the actual experience proved to be significantly more challenging. He managed to crash into no fewer than 3 sensor arrays before Nix remotely overrode the controls and guided him back to the docking bay. That was, she began as he stumbled out of the craft, hair standing on end from static discharge. Awesome, he suggested hopefully. I was going to say catastrophic, but your optimism is noted. By the end of the second week, Theo had established something resembling a routine. Mornings were spent helping with technical maintenance around the station, his human perspective on engineering problems frequently providing novel solutions that the Ogeron systems hadn't considered. Afternoons were dedicated to learning from Nix about Ogeron history and technology. Evenings were for them alone, the boundaries between mentor and student, between alien and human, gradually dissolving into something more personal. It was during one such evening that Nyx first allowed him to touch her hair, explaining the significance of the metallic strands woven through the black length. "They're memory conduits," she explained as his fingers gently traced one of the silver filaments. "They help us process and store information more efficiently." "Do they record everything?" Theo asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Not automatically," she assured him with a small smile. "Only what we choose to preserve." "And what are you choosing to preserve now?" Her eyes met his. "This," she said simply. "Us." The third week brought Theo's first true test, as Nyx was called away to assist with an archival emergency on the planet's surface. Left alone on the station, with only Crumb and the various service AIs for company, Theo found himself restless and worried. "She'll return," Crumb assured him after Theo had checked the landing bay for the 7th time in as many hours. "The statistical probability of abandonment is minimal." "It's not about statistics," Theo replied, pacing the observation deck. "It's about—" He trailed off, unable to articulate the fear that gripped him, that this entire experience was temporary, that the council would change their minds, that he would wake up to find it had all been an elaborate dream. When Nyx finally returned 3 days later, Theo was waiting in the docking bay, dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. The moment she disembarked, he rushed forward, stopping just short of embracing her, suddenly uncertain of the protocol. Nyx solved the dilemma by closing the distance herself, her arms wrapping around him in a gesture that was unmistakably intimate despite their physical differences. "You were worried," she observed, drawing back slightly to study his face. "Slightly concerned," Theo corrected with forced casualness. "Moderately unsettled. Marginally discomposed. You didn't sleep. Sleep is overrated." She touched his cheek, her fingers cool against his skin. "I came back, Theo. I always will." As the end of the lunar cycle approached, a subtle tension began to build between them. Neither spoke openly about the council's deadline, but it hung over their interactions, giving each moment a bittersweet edge. Theo threw himself into learning everything he could about the station and Ogeran culture, as if accumulating knowledge could somehow guarantee his continued presence. On what would be their final evening before the council's review, Theo prepared a surprise. With the help of the station's projection systems and some creative reprogramming by Crumb, he transformed their observation lounge into a simulation of the ancient courtyard on Callisto 6, complete with the tree-like structure where they had built their childhood hideaway. When Nyx entered, she stopped short, her eyes widening at the familiar scene. Gone was her formal archivist attire, replaced by a simple flowing robe that softened her official demeanor. For a moment, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "You recreated it," she said softly, moving through the projection to stand beside him under the simulated branches. "I had some help," Theo admitted. "Crumb can be surprisingly sentimental for a toaster." "I heard that," came the AI's disembodied voice before discreetly disconnecting from the lounge's systems. They sat together beneath the holographic tree, shoulders touching, watching the twin moons rise in the simulated sky. "Tomorrow the council decides," Nyx said after a comfortable silence. "Yes." Theo tried to keep his voice light. "Any insider tips on impressing ancient light beings?" "Be yourself," Nyx replied seriously. "They value authenticity above all else." "Great. So my charming human awkwardness might actually work in my favor for once." Nyx turned to face him fully. "Why did you really come, Theo? After all these years?" It was a question she'd asked in different ways throughout his stay, never quite satisfied with his various answers. This time, he decided on the absolute truth. "Because when I made that promise, it was the first time I committed to something bigger than myself. It was this pure moment of certainty in a life that's been mostly chaos and improvisation. And over the years, that promise became my anchor. When everything else changed, homes, jobs, relationships, that one constant remained. I promised I would find you. So I did." Nyx's eyes shimmered in the artificial moonlight. "I have something for you," she said, reaching into a fold of her robe. She withdrew what appeared to be a ring woven from fine, luminescent strands. "I made this, just in case you ever came back." Theo stared at the delicate creation. "You made this for me?" From Ogeron threads. They respond to the wearer's emotions, strengthening or loosening as needed, so they never break. She held it out to him. It was presumptuous, perhaps. "I have something too," Theo said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a simple ring fashioned from a piece of salvaged shuttle metal, polished to a soft gleam. "Made from pieces of my first ship and a lot of hope. Less fancy than yours, but equally presumptuous." They exchanged their creations under the light of holographic moons, each sliding the other's ring onto their finger. No elaborate vows were spoken, none were needed. The promise had been made long ago, in the simple language of children who didn't yet understand impossibility. Theo leaned forward, hesitant but determined, and pressed his lips gently to hers. Their first kiss, 15 years overdue. In its official record, transmitted via quantum relay to the Galloping Ghost maintenance system and subsequently transferred to the Flora's Intentions botanical logs, Crumb noted the following. Subject Theodore Reeves, no longer technically single, demonstrably less idiotic, abnormally happy. Has mastered basic navigation of alien transport systems, but still occasionally attempts to eat from cleaning dispensers. Integration proceeds at acceptable parameters despite statistical improbability. Subject Nix Vayani, slightly more luminescent than baseline. Ear twitching frequency increased by 37% during interactions with Theodore. Collections Department reports unprecedented organization of human historical artifacts. The Ogeron High Council has extended the cultural exchange program indefinitely, citing unique observational opportunities and harmonic resonance potentials, which this unit interprets as cosmic entities being unexpectedly sentimental. This concludes official documentation. Unofficial addendum. If anyone had told me our reckless human would actually find his childhood alien fiancée and somehow charm an ancient civilization into accepting him, I would have diagnostically checked their logic circuits. Universe continues to defy computational prediction. On the botanical research vessel Flora's Intention, now safely returned to charted space, Captain Barclay added a ceremonial leaf to the memory branch of his upper canopy, marking the successful completion of what the ship's log now referred to as the marriage migration mission. And somewhere beyond the Ogeron expanse, in a station orbiting a pearl-like planet, a human technician and an alien archivist continued their improbable story, teaching each other, challenging each other, and keeping a promise made under twin moons. Their tale, like all the best ones, would be carried by the stars, ridiculous and beautiful and true, exactly as promised.